the show. Tonight with us, we have the Water Authority of Fiji's CEO, Mr. Barry Olmundson, to talk to us about a few issues that a lot of people have had a lot of concerns about but haven't been addressed personally. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. Good to
There's
be
a
here.
lot that a lot of people have been saying about the Water Authority of Fiji, and we don't usually have the opportunity to speak to someone in your position about it. But before we get into it, how's it been working in Fiji so far?
Fantastic. Thank you. It's been fantastic. The biggest thing I've found is the people. I mean, we have some really talented people in the Water Authority of Fiji, doing the best they possibly can. So I've enjoyed the weather. I'm amazed how in such a fairly small area we have so much different weather from the west to the north and to Suva. And I kept saying to people, will it stop raining in Suva? It still keeps raining. But I found it. I'm enjoying the place. It's been good.
There's always this misconception that every time it rains or there's some bad weather, people automatically assume or expect that the Water Authority's services will take a bit of a hit or a blow, and that they expect some water disruptions, and they're almost taking it not just with a grain of salt, but they tend to expect it to happen. Do you see this being something that could be changed?
Over time, certainly. Over time. You know, let's put in the picture for all Fijians. You know, Fiji is no different to any other place in the world. Any other big city, same as Suva, they have breaks, they have old infrastructure. And the water and sewer has been around for a long, long time, put under the ground many years ago in Fiji and San Francisco, in Sydney and Brisbane, so it's the same. So we will have breaks over time as we replace them over time. Where we can improve though, and which we're working towards, is understanding our assets better, so we actually know and be able to predict when those assets need replacing or there's going to be a break. And that's working, that's sometime down the track.
So those are infrastructure and legacy issues that of course need to be worked on. I'm sure that the WAF already has a plan in place. Let's look at the work culture. A lot of times we happen to have certain inconsistencies that may pop up because there isn't a clear or a set standard work culture. There's also delays that may take place because of too much red tape or too many loopholes in the system. Has this been a factor that has affected your work as a CEO or the work of your team?
Certainly the culture. The culture for me is the most important thing, and what the Water Authority of Fiji's board is main point to me in their engagement with me is to change the culture. So the culture of the Water Authority of Fiji is not the best. We have some pockets of excellent work, but we have some pockets, as you just said, that's inconsistent, and we need to actually do that. Because my philosophy has always been, in my experience in building organisations that are high value, high performing teams, is you focus on the people. Because things get done through people. So we can engage and have our staff understanding more, better skilled, better motivated, we're able to deliver a more consistent, better service. So that's the cultural development plan. Is something I'm very passionate about, and the board has recently approved that in the last board meeting. So what that means is that we'll have some people helping us build our culture. We'll be engaging our staff from the ground up. So, and we look at values. So what the main thing that I'm focusing on is people, as I said before. So I want to ask my staff, what is it? 3 questions essentially. The first question is, what are the values? What's important to you? Is it respect? Is it accountability? Is it family? Is it sport? Is it religion? Whatever it may well be. Then I'm going to ask them, what are you experiencing at the Water Authority of Fiji at the moment? Are you experiencing silos? Are you red tape or whatever it may? What do you experience? Then I'm going to ask them, what would you like to experience? And that builds a basis. So I can energise our people and staff over time. They will be better tuned to deliver those services. It's a difficult job we have. It's a very difficult job. It's a 24/7 job. And as I say, if we can improve our consistency with the assets we have, we'll deliver better services over 3-year time.
Do you think that you'd require close partnership with other stakeholders, or would this be something that you'd be undertaking just internally?
The culture is internal, so it'll be internally done. But certainly we have a lot of close organisations we need to work closer together with. You know, what I've found so far in Fiji is probably a lack of collaboration between entities. You know, we need to work closer with FRA, we need to work closer with EFL, TFL, all those things. And I've met with those CEOs and we've all agreed to work closer for the betterment of Fiji. So we need to work on that collaboration. But certainly the cultural program we're going through at the moment can be taken in somewhere else, but certainly it's a focus on getting the Water Authority of Fiji people right first.
Now, pardon me for being so blasé about this, but you've noted yourself that there are certain inconsistencies, certain pockets, certain areas that are problematic. If you were to list them, what do you think they would be? Because there are people out there who have certain concerns, certain complaints that keep coming up over and over again. It's addressed, but then a few months later, instead of it popping up in the same area, the same concern or the same problem is raised in another area, and it's almost identical.
Well, if I had to give you a list, I'd be writing it for a couple of hours, because there's a lot of issues across the board, everywhere we go. But you know, our staff don't deliberately come to work and to do a bad job. I say to people that get angry with our staff, and those people who actually threaten our staff, that think about it, this is your mother, your sister, or your brother or your father. Would you be doing the same thing to them as well too? Because people come to work trying to do a good job. That's the basis that at the moment that I work on. What we need to do then is, because of the systems we have at the moment, they've been there for quite some time, particularly here in Suva, where I've met a lot of good friends who are customers, who I spent some time explaining how things are. And that's something we don't do very well at Water Authority of Fiji, that we're working on going to this new financial year, educating our community about what we have and how we're doing it. And most of the time we do a pretty good job with what we've got, but sometimes it's not the case.
So water is, of course, an essential service. It's a utility. Everyone needs to have access to it in this country, especially during these trying times with COVID. COVID-19, of course, brought with it a lot more complications and a lot more intricate details that you would have had to rework and re-look at. What were the main changes that you would have had to sort of implement once we heard that, you know, COVID cases have started coming up, and there's cases in Fiji? People need to have access to safe drinking water, access to water to wash their hands, but then they had water cuts that were persistent.
What COVID did for me as a CEO of the Water Authority of Fiji is identify inefficiencies and deficiencies, really, because I highlighted the fact that of the necessity of water. You know, I say to others out there that water is really essential for life. It's the only true essential service, in my view. So it did highlight our deficiencies in relation to that. So we've taken measures to improve those things. For example, we have a service level policy that we had in place that if there was a service cut by disruption, and we can't plan these things most of the time. They happen just like that. So then we need to respond to that. And the customers get angry saying, you haven't told us. Well, we can't tell you because we don't know it's going to break on most occasions. But the policy was then to put water carting after 8 hours. So that 8 hours would give our team some time to actually repair that. But at the moment, because of COVID, we've changed our service policy. So as soon as we've identified that there's a cut, we send a water cart out to do what we can.
Stay with us. We'll be back with more after this break. Welcome back. Now, Barry, we're talking about COVID-19 and some of the issues that had come up for both customers and also for the WAF itself. But if we were to look at one major issue that is not necessarily consistent but is persistent, a lot of people keep complaining about irregular water supply, about low water supply. They're saying that sometimes it's cut off without any notice, that, you know, even though you happen to have social media platforms where you could advise your customers that they would be having water cuts, that they're not told about it. It happens on a regular basis. How do you plan to address this issue, or what is the underlying issue? Why does this happen?
There's a number of things. Since January this year, we've increased our social media presence by 800%. So when we're able to tell our customers that something's happening, we do. Very rarely, and I challenge people that, very rarely if there's a break that's been planned, that we don't tell someone. That'd be quite rare, because we're quite informative. We use press releases, we use social media, we use text blasts for those people who subscribe. We use our own website as well too. So it's 800% increase in the last 6 months, 7 months. So that's one part of it as well too. Another element that we stress, and I do stress, is that we need to actually build a more resilient community. So we need not be reliant upon people to turn up straight away when something happens. So I say in all my press releases to people, please conserve water for at least 2 days, because things do happen. It's not just in Fiji, it happens elsewhere too, but things will happen. So if you've got that stored water for 2 days, as I have at home, and then you're better able to handle those breaks that occur unbeknownst to us. And sometimes during the day you have multiple breaks, and you have only small teams and trying to do the best, and they're working 24/7 at the moment. And for all those Fijians and who call me and say, well, these things happen and your team are getting overtime for it, just for overtime. Well, let me say to you that we have not been earning overtime since May. So the people are doing that without overtime. They're doing the 24/7 service as best they possibly can. but we can improve that. That's what the culture is about, improving our people and improving their service, and we will be able to do that. But breaks will always happen. Certainly, we haven't got a barrel of money. No one has that we can actually reach into now with the COVID world we live in at the moment. So the change of infrastructure as we grow, because we are growing, then the Suva, that area is phenomenal, with over 400,000 people growing as well too. And we're addressing that water issues we have there in that area, and also Suva Central through the Rewa Water Project. So this is a $100 million US project that's actually mostly funded by the Government of Fiji and Asian Development Bank, Green Climate Fund and the European Investment Bank, but predominantly 40% by the Fijians. And it will improve the water pressure and the water consistency. But there's a balance there at the same time. So when we introduce a new system into an old system, we need to balance that by valving, working our valves so we don't actually increase the pressure on what is an old infrastructure.
So of course that would be time consuming, that would be of course draining on resources as well with the money, the budget that you've been allocated. With that in mind, of course, this is an ongoing process. It's not like installing a light where you know it's going to be there. You can see the changes or the problems that may occur with it. What are the main reasons though that you happen to have all of these breaks that keep coming up? Is it because of old infrastructure? Is it something to be expected? Are there other factors that may be causing this?
Look, there are several probably factors, I think, to answering that question. It's no one's fault at the end of the day. This happens anywhere in the world, and I've worked in a number of water businesses. The thing with a water business as opposed to a roads business or electricity business, for example, is that water assets are predominantly under the ground. So they're forgotten. You don't drive on them every day, you don't turn the lights on every day. The only time people worry about water is they haven't got any water, or they can't flush their toilet, or can't have safe drinking water. So as a consequence, we don't invest probably as much as we could in certain times. But essentially, with a water business, we need to balance, and it's what we're doing. This is the trick of any water business is you balance the existing assets and trying to make the best out of the existing assets, but also catering for the growth. As I said, we get some significant growth in the Surrey corridor.
There have also been reports, and your team has also highlighted that recently they found that in some of their pump stations they found that there's quite a lot of waste that does end up there. This may be, of course, the debris that's come because of all of the water that is collected and comes by through all the main waterways, or maybe it's also other people that are throwing things. I think recently there was a case where a tyre was found in one of the pumps. Talk to us about how that impacts the services that you provide.
Okay. First of all, the waste that we're finding is actually in our sewer systems. So there's nothing, the water has not been affected, and water quality has not been affected.
So that's a misconception that
That's
people
a misconception. It's in the sewer system. People throw things in the sewer that you would not believe that makes its way into the pump. The concept where we have a tyre that was found in one of our water pumps, that is true. So we have an Awala water treatment plant. It has a pump station, but it has grills and it has a netting, so it stops the debris coming in. So someone's deliberately thrown a tyre in front of those pumps, and that's caught the pump up and damaged the pump. So nothing goes to, once the pump is going, it then pumps up to a treatment plant. Then it goes for a treatment process, then it goes for a screening, then it goes to the people. So there's no way that any debris of anything is going to get to the human consumption. So where we have the waste issues that have been thrown away for people in Fiji is through our wastewater systems, which then cause blockages and then cause overflows into the environment, which happens far too much from my perspective here in Fiji for the Water Authority of Fiji.
So while we're talking about misconceptions, let's clear a few of them. One of them happens to be that when people tend to get sort of milky water that comes out of the tap, they say that it's being too chlorinated, there are too many chemicals in there, it's not safe to drink. Of course, with WAF sometimes advising their customers that they should boil their drinking water, especially after periods of heavy rain when water is coming in. That's just a safety precaution, but there's a little bit of mistrust, shall we say, that people have, saying that I don't know if I should be doing this, I don't really want to drink the water, I think I should let it sit for a bit because I need to let the chemicals sort of settle in. Is there any truth behind this?
Water has got chemicals in, yes. The natural rainwater that falls into the catchment, it goes into the dam, into intakes. As it grows along the ground or through the trees, through the vines, it picks up sediment. It picks up a whole bunch of different chemicals itself that need to be treated that would not be good for for people, essentially, in high toxicities. The water that goes into a treatment plant at the end of the day then is treated, yes, and it's dosed. Now sometimes there's different qualities of water. There's the actual chemical qualities of water we need to adhere to, and we are, and there's the actual visual qualities, the aesthetic qualities of water, and that is how sometimes it looks or feels or tastes. But the water coming out of our treatment plants is safe to drink.
It's 100% safe to drink,
Most
of
certainly,
course,
it's
and it does not have any health implications. People sometimes say, oh, the water was a little milky, I had it and I've got a runny stomach. But it's got nothing to do with the water quality.
Not here, no. We always say boil water. You know, if once a break happens in a water pipe, for example, a team get down there and night or day and repair it. Then they put it back together again, and then they flush the system. So sometimes you see, and I've seen these water pouring out somewhere. I think, what, is that another leak? And I ring up my team and said, no, we're flushing the system to get rid of the sediment out. So then it gets flushed, then it goes to a pump station, to a treatment plant, to the people. So we're confident we're producing good quality water for our people.
Thanks. We'll be back with more after this break. Welcome back. Now let's look at the suspension of disconnections for connections for people in Fiji. Now, why do you think that this has been done in the first place? I think there's also a misconception that people think that they do not need to pay for the water bills that come in because they think that it's actually a waiver period. Could we get into the intricacies of that?
Okay, the reason we did this in the first place, so we're talking with the Fijian government, and this is what the Water Authority of Fiji board and team have put together, some way that we can actually help Fijians do this in this time where financially we're contracted. We all get that, you know, COVID's here. So we said, look, what we'll do then is we won't do any disconnections for a period of time, and in this case until the 31st of March next year. So we won't disconnect, but we have always, and through our media, have actually told people to don't forget to pay. Pay little increments, pay increments. Come 31st of May, the very next day there'll be a number of letters going out to people saying you owe us this money. It's a waiver. It's not a waiver, I should say. It's not a waiver of any fees. You have to pay at the end of the day. What we're doing is suspending for a period of time whilst we get ourselves together, pick ourselves up after COVID, but you have to pay at the end of the day.
So disconnections would start off at the very next day after this particular period ends, or would there be notices being sent out for disconnections?
Absolutely. There'll be notices sent out. We're sending notices out now. We're reminding customers already. We're doing that regularly, and we'll do that closer to the 31st of May. There'll be a lot of PR, so everyone will know that's the case. So that's why I'm urging people, when you get to the 31st of May, don't be one of those people that we have to say, hang on, we're going to disconnect, because we would have told you multiple times up until that point that you will be disconnected afterwards.
And you're pretty active in informing your customers about about these notices. Rather, I happen to be a WAF customer, and I just recently got a text message on my phone reminding me that there's a certain amount that I do need to pay off. Do you see this being something that people would be taking advantage of, saying, oh, I didn't get my bill in print form, I got it late, I wasn't receiving it, I changed addresses or something or the other? Are there multiple ways in which you're informing them, or are they only getting the information via one medium?
No, you're right. There's multiple ways. We text messages, there's Facebook, there's a social media, there's media releases, shows such as this, individual letters we're writing to people as well, too, reminding those people. You know, if you don't receive a bill at a certain time, we all know that we're billing is, you know, when your Water Authority Fiji customer comes along at a certain period every 3 or so months. So if you're not receiving a bill, it's up to the customer to actually then contact the Water Authority Fiji's customer service saying you haven't given me a bill, because sometimes things go missing. So we don't have to estimate the water.
And the government subsidy scheme, of course, still continues, which means that there is a significant amount of money that people will not have to fork out of their own pockets to pay for their bills.
Absolutely, and that's a significant thing that most people forget. If you're earning under less than $30,000, you have a certain amount of free water. And a lot of people actually don't use that water, so that the whole for the year, they're not paying anything.
If we were to look at, say, for example, someone who has recently lost their job because of COVID-19, maybe because of extenuating circumstances, they may not have gotten another job again, and they're currently staying at home without any source of income coming in. For these sort of circumstances, if you were to look at the deadline until when the suspension of disconnection is going to continue till, if they're still unable to pay, then what about those instances?
Look, there'll always be those instances. You know, we will be we have different types of arrangements we can come to. So long as some money is coming in, some commitment is down that we're actually coming in for paying for the service, because we need to actually recoup some money at the end of the day. You know, we're running a commercial business as much as we possibly can, providing a service. Chemicals cost money, staffing costs money. That needs to come from somewhere. So those people that are in those unfortunate cases, and there's so many of you that are out there at the moment, if you just come to the Water Authority Fiji Service Centre and if you have a bill, then as long as some arrangements enter into place, we're very reasonable in that case.
Comparatively, if you were to look at this particular point in time pre-COVID, for those who were not paying their bills for the amount that is owed to the WAF, is there an increase that you've seen, a significant increase, or is it just the same?
No, it's a significant increase of bills not being paid.
Mm-hmm. And how do you intend to sort of work with Fijians to sort of remind them that of course this is an essential service that is being provided to them, and they do need to have a burden of responsibility. The onus is on them as well to contact the WAF. Say, for example, if they're absolutely unable, it's absolute dire circumstances where they cannot pay at all. Do they need to make arrangements from now, or must they wait until the suspension period is, the suspension of the disconnection period is over?
No, we urge people to do now. As I say, we're doing multiple media platforms informing the public to the point we want to be in a position come March, and the end of March and April, that we can actually honestly put a hand on our heart and say, we've done our very best. There should be no reason why anyone in Fiji does not know they have to pay their bills.
If we were to look at, because there's no suspension of, there's no disconnection that is taking place right now, but if there is someone who does get a disconnection later on, or maybe in the past, there's been inconsistencies with the turnaround time for that. Why is that the case? Why isn't there like a specific turnaround period for having their water connections being connected again?
There is a set period of time with our customer charter, but we recently changed that because it's unreasonable. We have a 2-week period we're promising people, and the people are paying to do that for a service connection. The reality is we can't do that most times because there's different connections. It's not just a simple connection. If the line runs beside your house, then we simply connect into it. That's a pretty simple one. But if the line's on the other side of the road, that's an FRA road and FRA asset as well too, so we need to work with our colleagues in FRA, and that takes time to get through as well too, so we don't damage their assets. In some cases we have been. We don't want to do that because that adds to the cost. So all that takes time. So what we've done is reassess and got a better customer charter that reflects our ability to do things on time, which we will stick to. So please understand that we're doing our best. We have a number of small teams all over the place that are doing a remarkable job with what they've got to connect people when they can.
So that's for connections or reconnections. If we were to look at water cuts itself, what about the turnaround time for that?
Well, interesting to the water cuts. That's like anything in any organisation. There's some good and there's some bad, and we're really working. And just recently, the cuts in Lambasa we had over a period of 4 days, which is quite unfortunate. We were hammered really hard with our water cutting at the time. We need to actually improve our quality for water cutting. Not so much the water quality, but actually service quality. So that's the service time of delivery. The water's fine, it's just a delivery. It's also not coming to a street and driving past people waiting for buckets because you're going somewhere else, someone's called it. It's actually being more reasonable. So that's something we're certainly working on. What we've done though, since the COVID element, we had, as I've mentioned before, we had a customer service charter that says, once a break occurs, we'll come to you after 8 hours. At the moment, we come straight away. As soon as we get notification, we get our water carding out, a whole bunch of contractors, and doing their best as well too to deliver water where we can. But it can improve, and it will improve.
We'll be back with more after this break. Welcome back. Barry, this is our 4th segment. I think one thing that we should be looking at is comparatively the prices and also the services of accessing water in Fiji compared to accessing water globally. Fiji's got some very, very, very cheap rates, and of course this is something that people are still wondering, why is it so cheap, and then there's also that mindset that sort of comes in, well, you're not paying as much for it, so maybe you shouldn't be expecting premium service because you're not paying quite as much for utilities. Interesting
question. My view as the CEO of Water Authority Fiji, you should always expect premium service, regardless of what you pay for it. We're here to do a job, we should be doing the best of our ability and be very consistent. So we need to improve that. That's one side. The other element is most certainly the water price in Fiji is one of the lowest in the modern world, certainly in the Pacific, 15 cents a litre. So what that means then is generally we see people wasting water. Because remember, we still have that free water for those under $30,000. earning a year as well. So there's a whole bunch of free water there as well too. Then on top of that, you have a very low price. People don't care greatly about the water, so we waste it, and that doesn't help us delivering services. We also have the part that we too ourselves, the Water Authority of Fiji, we waste water as well too. We do so on the basis of what we call non-revenue water, which is water that leaks as well. And this is treated water as well too. So, but we're working on that. We've got a plan in place to rectify that and bring those levels certainly down. In the west, we're low, and also the north. So, water is a scarce resource. We just want people to conserve as much as they possibly can. As I've always said, please conserve and save water for at least 2 days for those things when things go wrong.
If we were to just get maybe some numbers from you, when you say that levels are low, how low are they? Are we in critical stages right now, or is it okay?
No, it's okay. We're not in critical stages. We're trending down. We'll need some water in our catchments to fill up those areas that we need, but at the moment it's not critical. But we shouldn't wait till things get critical before we act. So that's what I'm saying to Fijians, please conserve your water.
Just coming back to what you mentioned, in a hypothetical situation, if you were to tell us about what people could expect, not should expect, but what they could expect if you were to probably give them an idea of just how much water should be costing, so that they realize that, of course, it's a precious resource, they shouldn't be wasting it, and also to cover your operational costs, what do you think it would be?
Well, what we think would be, and we've done some work on this, we've had a specialist consultant come in and actually does this all over the world, and from a 15% platform we would go to a 24 cents platform. Exactly. That would cover our operational costs, we believe. And we think with that small increase at the same time too, that would be a marker for people to say, whoa, okay, we need to actually pay for this now, I'm going to use less. Because we haven't got a great deal of water. Yes, it rains all the time from time to time, you've got to capture that water and you've got to treat that water as well too. But there's a lot, Fiji's a growing population as well too. So we just, please conserve the water.
Looking at, say, for example, alternative means of not just storing water, but also having access to water, because certain times you do happen to have circumstances where people have stored water, they've run out of water, they've tried to get water carting services, there's delays there, and they have other factors that come into play. What is the WAF doing to address this?
Well, that's a good question again, because that's exactly what's occurring in some places. So we're not providing service to the right level at this stage in some places. We lack the consistency. We're aware of these things, and what we're putting measures is actually having our water cart operators operate under a very stringent framework. We need to actually recognise too that we don't differentiate between whoever calls us. If we have someone that needs water, we send a person there. So when we have people that are ringing in, and we have it ringing in and ringing to other levels of government to fast-track their water, there's a list on how we go things. There's a methodology that we undertake that our people work on the list by people calling in. And so we have a geographic list, and we work it this way. When people call in and try to change it around for calling other people to call me, then that changes things around. It makes it more difficult. It becomes more chaos, which doesn't happen. We're trying to please everyone, because the reality is you can't please everyone at all.
So if I were to have your number and I have a water cut at home, it doesn't mean if I call you and say, Barry, there's a water cut at home, I need the water restored, it doesn't necessarily mean that you'd get working on it straight away. There's, of course, a certain process that needs to be followed, and that's what most people tend to forget.
Yes, essentially yes, when people do ring me, and I'll remember not to put my mobile on my next business cards.
Let's look at something else, outsourcing of services. When you work with other contractors, say for example, even with water carting services, how has that been in the past so far, and with some of the inconsistencies that have popped up with those particular issues, how will you work on it, how will you address that?
The board's already asked me, he said, about outsourcing. I need to come up in the next couple of months with an outsourcing framework. What that does is actually look at internally what things that can be done more efficiently and as effectively and hopefully cheaper by others other than ourselves. So I'm working on that at the moment. But just because something's outsourced doesn't make it better at the end of the day, nor does it make it cheaper. And what we need to do, and what we've found already in my time I've been here, is when you outsource something, you need to actually have a dedicated team that actually understands the contract and actually understands supervision. Because you need to, it's just like any staff, you need to actually have them supervised. You just can't outsource something expecting miracles to occur. You need to set something up internally to actually manage those outsourced services. Now, the FRA does this pretty well. They've set themselves up to do that. So we need to do something similar to that.
So if you were to look at certain aspects of the business that you would be outsourcing, what would they be?
things like meter reading, for example, those connections and disconnections we just spoke of, some of those simpler tasks that we can actually define, because sometimes you can't outsource the operation and maintenance per se, because that goes up and down, and essentially you have a break, different types of breaks, and it's hard to quantify those things. But certainly some of the more simpler things we can.
Let's look at customer service and also response so far. Like you said, you've been very active on social media. What's the response been like with the increase in social media presence? Did it correlate to customer satisfaction?
I could say yes, it did. Yes, it did. And it also actually correlated to customer satisfaction because they're having more of a dialogue with us, and they're letting us know when the service hasn't been good enough, and also when we actually repair something, which we do sometimes, and it leaks again. For example, someone rings me again and or contacts me through social media and says, "Great job, you fixed it, but you broke down the line a bit further." I said, "Okay, so we're onto it." So that's opened the dialogue with our customers, and that's what I really want to do. So as I said before, about educate our customers about our business. As I say, we don't come to work to fail, we come to work to do our very best. But sometimes things happen. If they have understanding more about our business, they're better able not to be so angry when they ring up and have a go at our staff.
We'll be back with more after this break. Welcome back. Barry, this is our final segment. So there's a few things that I think we should definitely touch on. We did talk about the free water scheme, the subsidy that's currently in place right now. There's of course a lot of Fijians that will be benefiting from this. But if we were to look at, say, for example, those who happen to own small businesses that during these trying times, they would of course be benefiting even more, because not just as a customer, as a regular household, they are running a business, they need to make some money, and of course this would be something that they can definitely rely on to cut their costs.
Absolutely. I mean, they'll be under $30,000. So people specifically this caters for the car washers, and there's a lot of those self-businesses out there doing a fantastic job. That even if I get my way and actually we're able to increase the price of water to cover my operational costs, that $30,000 level stays regardless.
And on social media, of course, I happen to have had a glance at your Facebook page, which of course is quite popular in Fiji. A lot of people do happen to be quite active on social media. With Facebook, they're able to chat with customer representatives, that is, and voice their concerns. There's also something that the WAF had lagged in the past, which was direct communication with customers. Of course, you've noted that this has been something that has been addressed via these particular platforms. But what are the major things that you have seen? What are the changes that this engagement has brought about? Well,
really, it follows a global trend to have a direct contact and communication not via the customer, not via a third party. So that's what we're doing. As I said, we've increased our social media presence by 800%, which is a significant amount. But we did start from a very low base, so we still have work to do there as well too. I like it because it's quick. We get feedback straight away, whether it's positive or negative. We take both on board. We learn from the things that are negative, and we actually celebrate the things that are positive. So it actually makes things happen faster, and it provides a more educated community.
If you were to take, say, for example, TQM principles, total quality management principles, one of them is continuous improvement. With this particular medium, you being able to engage with customers, of course, it has been pretty good. But have you seen a reduction in the nature of the complaints, or maybe even in the number of complaints that have come in?
Yes, we have. The complaints have definitely gone down from a year ago. 100% gone down. And probably that's just more also, doesn't mean there's still things not happening out there. We all know that water breaks and water carding occurs, but more the ability and the anger to ring up and complain about something because they don't know about it. Now they're more informed, and I think that's more important as well too.
Looking forward in the next 6 months, what are some of the key priority or areas that WAF will be looking into?
Well, as I mentioned earlier on, the first part is the culture, building a cultural development plan, working with the staff to make them, as I always say, make them better people at work. It makes them better people at home. We have better communities. So we'll be working on that. We actually have an annual business plan now for the first time, so we have a very much direction and accountability. Every 3 months we report to our board about those things we promised to deliver. And we will deliver upon those things and hold people. So that means action on the ground for people in Fiji. It means better service at the end of the day and better quality of service.
What about community engagement, actually making them aware of, say, for example, the workplace changes or maybe the culture changes that may be reflected into the services that WAF provides?
Exactly. We're doing that as well too. We have a communication plan we're working on with our specialist consultants at the same time, which actually then more of a communication education. It's a one-on-one. You know, the best way to communicate, in my view, is actually go out and talk to people, listen to people. Mainly listen to people, because people's got a story. So we listen to the people, take those things on board. We talk about the truth. This is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. And 90% of the time, the things that we try and do things, they'll work. They'll be okay. Sometimes things don't go as according to plan. Sometimes we make mistakes, but that's life. Every organisation is the same. So we want to build that dialogue, and more importantly, I want to actually build that trust. That's, to me, when I first got here, that was clearly not evident. There was no trust in the community with the Water Authority Fiji and our services, and rightly so at the time. But it doesn't mean that people inside the Water Authority Fiji themselves aren't coming to work, as I said, trying to do the best they can. So we now have a coordinated strategic response and approach over the next number of years. We're focusing on the next 3 years, and COVID's reminded us as well at the same time on the basics. Let's get the basics right first. So that's actually delivering upon our service with the existing assets we have and do a very good job. Communicate. All those things we haven't been doing well before we start getting super sexy with some of the things we want to do. Let's focus on what we should be doing right in the first place.
If we were to get, say, for example, not necessarily a time frame, but just an idea of when major infrastructure works that do need to be looked into, when do you think the turnaround time for that would be? Say, for example, major works with pipes.
That's a hard thing to answer because it occurs every time, all the time. We have $120 million given to us with the government of Fiji to work with our capital program. It's a lot of money. Reality, it's a lot of money. And we need to actually make sure that there's a return on investment for that money. So things like the Rewa Water Project, for example, we'll spend over $50 million this year. But that won't come into effect on the ground for a year later when it's connected to the system. So these things take time. So we have extensions and development areas that are going all the time, so we're putting new lines in. We're really focusing on a rural area, and there's significant work to be done in a rural area. There's so many villages without proper sanitation, for example. You know, only 35% of Fijians have proper sanitation, and to me that's not a very good statistic at all. We want to improve that, and we certainly are working with the rural communities to do that. And those things will happen a lot quicker than the more larger infrastructure that takes time to put in place and to fund.
What about wastewater management? Any plans for that for the next few years?
Most certainly. We actually have at the moment, it's one area we can really improve upon. The reality is that we haven't really done a great deal in terms of operating or maintaining our wastewater assets for a number of years. For example, we're at the moment going for a desludging program. So that means taking all the stuff that's been in there for a number of years, taking it out, filtering it and disposing of it properly. That allows the capacity to increase because these plants are old and the community has grown up around those plants. So we need to make sure that the plants are capable of supporting those communities, which we're doing. So that's actually happening now and over the next 2 years.
Well, thank you very much for your time today, and we hope to have you back in the next couple of months or so to maybe touch base and see how things are going.
Happy to be back.
And hopefully there's no more water disconnection, not disconnections, but water cuts, at least in my area.
And mine.
That's all we have for you tonight. Join us again next week.